Welcome to Mic Drop, the podcast where relevancy is irrelevant and we don't give a shit about your feelings. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, it's both an honor and a pleasure to welcome my next guest to the podcast. He is a repeat guest, so I'm not going to go through the full introduction. He's a good friend of mine. He's been on the show before. He's a former Navy SEAL. He's an overall badass. And most importantly, he is running for Congress in the great state of Arizona. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Mr. Eli Crane.
Thank you, Mike, for having me back, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for coming. So I guess the first question that I would ask is, what the fuck were you thinking?
On what occasion?
For all of them. No, I'm kidding. Just in terms of running for Congress, what was the thought process? I remember when you were here the last time, you actually mentioned afterwards that there was a good chance that you were going to do that, but you hadn't announced it yet, so we didn't talk about it at all, and it was kind of in passing going out the door. So I'd love to get kind of what was the point at which you said, you know what, this makes sense and this is what I want to do. Was there kind of that light switch moment for you?
Yeah, there was. And it's weird with talking about that stuff. There's some compliance rules where you can only confirm that one time, and from the time that you confirm it, like it's game on. And so, yeah, that's why you'll see candidates be very careful about when they can say it, when they can announce it, just because of the, some of the rules behind how that works. But for me, just being a concerned citizen and, watching the headlines get more ridiculous every morning when I fired up my phone or my laptop or whatever it was, being a dad and, just being a patriot who loves this country and realizing that, coming to that stark reality that, wow, the biggest threats to this country right now are within. It's not like, and that it's not to say clearly we don't have some massive foreign threats, because we do, but the biggest, a house divided cannot stand. And there's a lot of people trying to divide this house, in every way, shape, and form. And so just coming to the realization that was going on. And then, I actually had some folks that, I'd met when filming a commercial for another Arizona politician. I was asked to do a commercial for an Arizona politician. And at first I was a little hesitant to do it. It wasn't necessarily something I was looking to get involved in, but when they told me, hey, it was basically a commercial that was an anti-Mark Kelly commercial, who's actually a former Navy guy. He's a former astronaut. And
it was his wife that got shot, right? Yeah.
Yep. But his, and not to say that I don't respect Mark Kelly and what he did in his military career and then what he did as an astronaut, but from a political standpoint, once you cross that line, and in my mind, it's like game on.
Yeah.
Once you start to become part of the establishment that's destroying this country, because of just reckless, out of touch policies, I was like, yeah, I'm in. I'll do the commercial. And so did the commercial, and then some of the folks, that were facilitating that reached out to me. I don't know, maybe 7, 8, 9 months later, and said, hey, we want to talk to you. We think you might be able to flip this seat in Arizona from blue to red.
Yeah.
Would you consider it? And so you got the concerned patriot, the concerned dad watching this stuff, getting pissed off about it, and then an opportunity comes up to try and do something about it. And then, like everybody else, I go into my decision cycle. I start to pray about it, start thinking about it, start talking to my friends, advisors, peers. Hey, what do you guys think? Do you think this is foolish, stupid? And, the resounding theme, the collective was, hey, Eli, we think you should give this a go. We think you'd be good, good at it. So that collectively is what led me to what the hell were you thinking?
Yeah. Was there a part of you that thought like, who the fuck am I to be a congressman? Like
100%. And I still think that every day, Mike.
Yeah.
And you know what's funny about that is, you know, I don't know if you ever got this from any of your instructors or at any time in the teams, but, you know, I remember one time having one of our SEAL instructors, he said, there were like 40 of us in this class, and he said, hey guys, and this was when we were getting close to the end of training, and he said, you know, he said, it's not even that we're that good. It's that everybody else sucks so much.
Yeah.
And I just, like, I didn't get it. I didn't get what he was trying to say at the time. It took me several years to understand what he was talking about. And it's not that Navy SEALs aren't good at certain things, because we are, but one of the things I noticed is that there's so much that you have to be able to do.
Yeah.
So many environments that you have to be able to work in, so many disciplines that you have to, you know, work at, that you never really get to specialize in any one thing.
Yeah.
I mean, when you look at the way even a SEAL training cycle is broken up, I noticed as a sniper, one of my specialties, that there were times where I wouldn't shoot my gun for 3.5 months.
Yeah.
Because you know, it'd be a block of air week, which was 2 weeks or whatever, and then you'd go to mobility. You're not shooting your sniper weapon during mobility. That's, you know, that's a 3-week block or whatever it is today. And then you'd go to, you know, land warfare, and that's IADS and all of these things. You're not really shooting your sniper rifle then, you know. And it was just like, I started to understand what he said, you know, and I feel like there's a correlation in politics, and even me personally as a candidate, I know I'm not that good, man. I tell people all the time I'm not that good. It's just when I look across the aisle at some of the other folks that are representing us, like, you know, I'll just say it, like Ilhan Omar, you know, the squad, AOC. Like, to me, those folks are, you know, they're bad for this country.
Yeah.
And I mean, clearly their constituents are voting them in. So that's, you know, if that's what their citizens want, then that's what they get. And that's how this system works. But when I look at that, I'm like, Mike, I know I'm not that great, but I can't do any worse than these guys over here. And so, and I think I think it's important that as a candidate, you know, who might end up doing this job, that you keep that level of humbleness and realism, and understand that you're not God's gift to anything, but you're just you're a concerned dad, a concerned citizen, and you're like, hey man, I'm far from perfect, but if you guys think I'm qualified and worthy, I'll go and I will represent you the best I can. And that's all you can do. Yeah. Right.
No, I agree. And I mean, it's absolutely refreshing to hear you say that, because one of the things I actually talk about it in this book that I just wrote, aptly titled Unfuck America, which I think is the common goal for both of us, but is that one of the big problems with politics is that it's turned into, you know, far beyond a popularity contest. You know, it's always kind of been that way, but now with social media being what it is, and people's profiles and personalities being what they're most known for as a politician, is they're following on Twitter or Instagram or whatever, and a lot of the little trick fuck memes and you know, jokes and jabs and just kind of the same shit that you see on there, basically. You know, I think that's a huge problem, is that a lot of our politicians, and some of them haven't been politicians that long, who are, you know, supposed to be representatives, kind of have it backwards. You know, it's like they get into this entitled feeling of a position where, you know, they think that it's like, I'm telling my constituents how the cow eats the cabbage. They're not telling me what's up. I'm giving it to them how it needs to be. And I think that coupled with just that kind of ego-driven rock star kind of mentality is fucking poisonous, and it's really ruining it. And I didn't think it could get ruined much more than it is, and it seems like it continues to go downhill year after year. Do you see that same kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and I think ego plays a lot into that. I think pride plays a lot into that. And I also think not having term limits plays into that a lot.
Yeah.
I think that if we actually had individuals that were willing to go, you know, for a more reasonable limit of time, like say whether you have a lot of individuals that have been in Congress or in public service for 30, 40 years. Like if you had like a more reasonable, I think, limit of time, whether it was 10 or 12 years, something like that, and people actually knew that they were going to be going, this wasn't forever. And my goal isn't to continue to establish my position here, but I'm going to be going back and living amongst these folks. I think that you would see a lot less of that.
Yeah.
I could be wrong, but
I think so too. One of the things that I have written down is term limits. Is that the tricky part, I think, is that you kind of see that in the military in some positions where there's too fast of a turnover.
Yep.
Like to me, 1 term or even 2 is probably too few. But I don't know what makes sense. Was it 10 years, 12 years, 15, 8? I don't know. I don't know if you have a kind of a thought process on that. Obviously, you're also not there yet.
Exactly.
Hopefully you will be there. And to me, I would love to have you come back like a year after you've been there and actually give us a peek behind the curtain to a certain extent. I will say, like of all the other guys that I've known, pretty much all of them have been invited and none of them have come back. Yeah. And to me, if there's one thing that people want to fucking see,
that's because you swear way too much, bro.
I do.
Yeah, no, I'm just kidding.
I wouldn't doubt it.
Well, I tell you what, dude, I'll make you a deal right now.
Yeah.
I will come back, but here's the kicker. I got to drive that McLaren.
Absolutely, 100%.
You won't even have it, I guarantee, by that
Probably
time.
Not.
But whatever. How about this? Whatever you have, I get to come drive it.
If we can videotape it.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. No, that'd be sweet,
absolutely, man. Fucking A. Well, you have a deal.
Because to this point, the fastest car, I have a Z01 Camaro, which is it's a muscle car.
Legit.
It's pretty quick, but a friend of mine, Andy, has a GTR.
Oh yeah.
And it's a pretty quick car, but
it's probably all souped up with a bunch of aftermarket.
Yeah, because he owns a company called Steel Racing, and so he makes all the little fans that like cool off brakes and stuff for like NASCAR, Baja. I mean, this guy, I love this dude. He's a good dude, and just the fact that he'll let me drive his cars, I'm like,
absolutely, that's good shit.
Really cool.
But yeah, so I guess my point in bringing that up is that if there's one thing that I think a lot of people want is that same guy that was running, that had his hand out saying, "Hey, I need your support," is to be that same fucking guy once they're actually in there, and basically none of them are. Yeah. It's like, okay, I'm here now. I don't need you for another 4 years. And then when I do, it's stump speech after stump speech. And it's all this like keyhole manufactured cookie cutter bullshit that everybody's like, yeah, it's the same whore in a different dress. It's all the same dumb shit. And people are largely tired of it, so. Yeah.
And I'll just go into it and talk a little bit about that. And just some of you and I were talking before we even started about a little bit of that, but so I think a lot of why you see that dynamic, and I think some of it is what you're talking about as far as, hey, I'll come back and call you Mike when I need you type deal. But I think some of it too is like I was telling you that, as you get closer and closer to actually getting this job, there's more and more people playing the I got you game, and they're recording you with devices in their pockets, or they'll be recording you with their cell phone while you're giving a speech. And then they'll, like, this happened to me this week. Somebody was at an event that I was doing up in Springerville, Arizona. And this gal, she was recording me with her phone on the table, and she took a 13-second clip of a 30-minute stump speech that I gave. And, it was clearly wasn't the best sounding clip, and she did it on purpose because she took it completely out of context. And then she posted that online, and now it's, this is who I am type deal. And so I think, and you'll appreciate this, Mike, as a businessman, attorneys and lawyers, their job is to advise you to keep you out of as much trouble as possible. Like if you went, and the deal, like sometimes when I call my business attorney and I'm like, hey, I have this situation. I'm thinking about doing X, Y, and Z. What's your guidance? What's your counsel? A lot of time they'll give you, their default is to give you the counsel that mitigates the most risk.
Yeah.
And in politics and in campaigning, what you have the same type of thing, but they're called campaign consultants and advisors and attorneys and so on and so forth. And so what a lot of these folks, I think what happens with a lot of them is they're doing this, and then they have these folks in their ear who have seen how, these little snippets, these tidbits go viral, and then it's a CNN headline, and it's Mike Ritland, is this monster over here. And so, it comes down to like, how much do you care? How much are you willing to expend to be authentic? Because that so much is going to be taken out of context. And it's like, I think some people just get tired of, these little gotcha games, and they get tired of, the memes and the headlines when stuff is taken out of context. And so they're like, I'm not going to do that crap anymore. I'm just going to make sure that my constituents are taken care of. I'm going to do everything I can to, help them out. And I'm going to focus my time and energy on legislation that I think is going to, improve people's lives. And so a lot of it has to do with how many arrows, how many shots are you willing to take before you alter course? Or are you just that guy that's going to be like, I really don't care, man. You guys can say whatever you want about me. I'm going to keep doing the long form podcast. And if you guys want to take what I say out of context and blast me on it, that's fine.
Yeah. No, I mean, I certainly can understand and appreciate that. I mean, just doing what I do, I've run into that on a much, much smaller scale, obviously. But so I'm completely sympathetic to that. I guess the thing where it kind of falls on one side of the fence or the other for me is that, if the drive and goal is to be a public servant and to go to Washington and serve your country, that to me is different than really everything else, whether it's owning a business or being, popular on social media for whatever the reason, or what have you. And so, there's been, people that have asked if I've ever thought about it, and kind of for that reason, I'm like, no, I wouldn't want to put my family through that. Like, it's hard enough just in what I do with the podcast and some of the things that I have on social media, navigating that, why would I want to bring more onto it? So I certainly understand that. And even given the fact that it's like, hey, yeah, I'm rogering up to serve my country, there's still only so many times you want to get kicked in the nuts, before it's just like, dude, why am I doing this? So I can appreciate that. I guess that, for me, I wish that there was, I'm not saying do every single opportunity, but there are some that I think, and I'll use my show as an example, that you could come on, and this is for any, former team guys that are now politicians or other people that I've known in that space, that I would hope that they know that they could come here and it would at least be fair, and I'm not looking to trick anybody or for that matter, even post things that that are going to make them look bad on purpose. Like that's not something I would ever do. But so it would be nice to have kind of that connection back to the grassroots part of kind of what got them.
I'll definitely come to your show, man.
Yeah,
and if I don't, you can join in the chorus.
I'll throw this clip out of context.
You could start lobbing stuff at me online as well, but it's all good, man. I'll come to your show. But I mean it. I'm driving the McLaren, whatever you have, dude.
No, count on it. It's a deal.
All right.
So I am curious, just like kind of a brief synopsis on how does the whole process work as far as like when you say, okay, I'm going to run, what are the next steps that get you to the point where you're legitimately a candidate?
Yeah. So you definitely file some paperwork. Like I said, you announce. And then you start fundraising
at that point. Do you have like an advisor that's helping you along the way and all?
You don't have to, but in my case we did.
Yeah.
And so that's been one of the blessings for me is that I have some folks that this isn't their first rodeo that have been willing to come alongside me and help guide me through this. This pretty wild new chapter in my life. But it's like a lot of things. There's the administrative paperwork, there's the filing, of your candidacy, and then you start building out your team.
What are the two key components for canine success? That's effective training and proper nutrition. Fueled by Team Dog brings those two components to your family and best friend. The perfect nutritional balance that results in a higher mental acuity, energy, overall vitality, and even an improved appearance. Every product you will find in my company's store was born from the battlefield and not from the boardroom. Let my life's work help you become your dog's hero.
Yeah. Have there been any issues along the way that caught you totally off guard during that process that you weren't expecting, or that were, that you're just like, holy shit, wait, what do I have to do? Like, was there any of that kind of?
I don't think there's anything that's caught us totally off guard.
Yeah.
I think one of the only things that has really surprised me is, how badly some people really want to do this, to the point where it's like, it's almost like scorched earth, where you'll have people that almost, that will become opponents of yours, that almost have this, hey, it's my time, Mike, step back, bro. This is my time.
Yeah.
And I don't, it's like, it's interesting, man. I'm probably one of the only candidates that actually, when I do my little stump speech or presentation, whatever you want to call it, I actually read the names of my opponents, and I strongly suggest that, whoever I'm speaking to, go look these folks up, learn about them, and then, vote however you see fit, because I think there's obviously a lot of problems in America, and even with how we elect people. And one of them is that as voters, we're pretty complacent. We're pretty lazy.
Yeah.
We don't even it's like we're so busy in our lives that if we see a commercial of somebody and it sounds like they have a relatively decent story, that's probably good enough. So we judge a lot of our candidates on a surfacey level.
Yeah.
Instead of actually going and learning about them. And so that's a part of this two-sided coin. But the other part of the two-sided coin is when you get into this world, and it drives a lot of folks crazy that even on my own team that I do this, but so much of this is about name ID. So you're not supposed to raise your opponent's name ID, right? You're definitely not supposed to mention their name as little as possible. And so, but that's part of the problem as well. Like if you had more educated constituents or voters, and you had candidates that were willing to be more transparent and be like, hey, these are your choices. I respect you enough to make the best decision possible, and I would actually rather lose. But you guys feel like you had the most knowledge to make the best choice so that you could get the best representation possible. And that's the way I look at this, man, because I never wanted to do this job, Mike, there's a freedom in that, man. Yeah. It's like, I might've said this the first time, I don't remember how much we got into it. It's been a while since you and I did that first podcast, but when you go through anything, whether it's SEAL training or starting a business or, even running for office, you kind of form a couple mantras that you just go back to on a daily basis. And one of mine has been, Eli, do not focus on the outcome. Do not focus on the outcome. Focus on your posture today in the here and now. Because if you start, what happens, especially with candidates, when they start focusing on the outcome and winning, I got to win, then your posture becomes, I got to do whatever it takes to win.
Yeah.
And that's what happens. And it's like, if once you develop that posture of I'm solely outcome driven, and don't get me wrong, I understand why people are solely outcome driven, especially in politics, when so many people put their blood, sweat, and tears and money and investment behind it. But like I said, then you just start, that becomes your sole focus, and you quit caring as much about the constituents and whether or not they get the best representation possible. And so for me, it's kind of a freeing thing. It's like, look, hey, these are the candidates. These are the guys running against me, and I trust you enough to make the right call. And if even if that's not me, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
The one thing I wasn't okay with, Mike, was sitting on my tail and just complaining about it.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's like I said, it's again, something that's really refreshing to hear, because I think you're spot on there, is that so many of these people that run for office, it's kind of a burn your bridge moment, or burn the boats moment rather, where, in essence, if this doesn't work out, what the fuck am I going to do?
Yeah.
And to me, like, I think that's a crucial component to being a successful politician, where you're not running because you need the job.
No.
You're running because you want to do something about the state of affairs that our country is in. And I think too many people see that as a meal ticket.
Yeah.
It's like, well, fuck, once I'm in, then my portfolio's 10X in 4 years, and, I've got a fucking sweet gig for the rest of my life, and I'm on easy street financially. And, that I don't think there could be a shittier reason to get into politics than that, So,
yeah.
I've got a couple of ideas on, from a campaign finance reform and even from an election reform standpoint that I'd love to throw your way to get your take on it. I talk about it in my book, and I've talked about it with a couple of other guests over the last few months. But, to me, one of the big problems with elections, generally speaking, is the influence. In every other country, it's called bribery. Here, it's called lobbying. And there's such a big influence. And I'm not naive to the fact of why it is the way that it is. I do know how the world works, having owned my own business and such for a number of years. However, that's where the water gets muddy, and decisions start being made not because it's the best decision, but because, well, I'm beholden to this guy because he did this for me. It just turns into the good old boy, rubbing elbows network. And so my thoughts were, having been a grand juror on a couple different occasions in the county where my facility is located, the way that they selected that makes a lot of sense, I think, for national level Congress. It wouldn't work for president or for some of the higher things, but and this is going to be a long-winded explanation, so bear with me. But, of the three branches of government, I think the legislative branch honestly is the most powerful, because everything has to basically go through there. The judicial branch isn't the judicial branch without the vetting of the legislative branch. President, similarly, there are a lot of powers that are of a veto authority on the legislative side, and they're kind of the gatekeeper of the other two branches, more so than the other two are of it. To me, the beauty and the genius behind that, whether it was initially intended or not, I'm assuming it was, is that that's the most representation nationally of the entire country. So if the collective mean average of everybody who's representing the entire population doesn't like this Supreme Court justice, well, then it's best that they're not on the in that seat. Same thing with the president. And so, to me, if you go about the election process in a manner where, similarly to the grand jury system, where you essentially take each region, however it's broken up into region, and there's a basic checklist of a net positive citizen, right? So you're basically you're up to date on your taxes, you're not a felon, you've lived there for a certain amount of time, you're just a net positive citizen. Is that they're solicited to give a short list of names of the people that they would want representing them as a congressman in that area, and once all of those names are submitted, whoever has the most votes is the congressman for that area, right? So you immediately get rid of the finance aspect, because it doesn't matter. You immediately get rid of if you put me in here, I'll do this for you because you own this construction company, and if you get me in, I'll hook your brother up, because all of that type of shit that seems to run rampant with earmarks and what have you. But each Congress seat at that point is, and just like with jury duty, you don't get a choice. Is that if there's that many people in that county or region or whatever that sector is for that seat, decide that Eli Crane is the fucking guy that I want doing it,
yeah,
you're the one doing it. Is that perfect? No. Are there going to be challenges? For sure. But I think at this point, like, our system seems so fucked up to where it's going to take some sort of huge reset button hit or big overhaul to get rid of all of the intricacies of corruption. Because to me, to try to get you guys, once you're there, to vet it, and I'm not, picking on you, I'm just saying, congressmen in general, it's like asking the fox to audit himself in the hen house. Like, of course they're not going to change things that are hugely beneficial to them. So, it was an idea that I had that seems like it makes sense. I'm curious to get your take on that.
Well, it would be interesting to kind of, chalkboard that and look at pros and cons. I will tell you, as you were talking, there's one thing that, just because I understand that, like, almost any system is corruptible, and obviously it comes down to a risk mitigation thing. Like, for instance, in the example you just brought up, if I'm still an influential guy that really, really wants to be a congressman in your system, right? All I'm going to do at that point is I'm just going to call the influencers or the citizens that you were talking about that have a chance to submit the name, and I'll be like, hey, Mike, here's the deal. You take care of me. You write my name on that list. I got you, bro. I'm going to take care of you. And so, I don't know if it would be less corrupt or less, or a better system than the one we have now. I would be interested to just have, get in a room with smarter individuals than myself, and all of us just throw darts at it and, see what comes of it. That's usually in my decision-making loop is, hey, think about these things, tear it apart, try and rebuild it back together, bring others into it. But, I see what you're saying in that instead of having an individual go around and do the stump speeches and raise all the money, and then the individuals get to pick from like 5 or 6 people, it sounds like in the system you're proposing, they would get the opportunity to just, submit names of even people that, aren't necessarily running for Congress.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Because, that is how that works, is that, like, I'll use me as an example. I'm standing in my driveway working with a fucking dog one day, and the constable shows up and hands me, papers that says, hey, you've been selected for grand jury duty for the next 6 months. You don't have a choice. Like, this is part of your civic fucking duty.
Right.
And I had to go do it, and that's how they do it, And so to me, while yes, I can see, could there be still people influencing? Of course. That's always the case. I guess the benefit that I see in doing it that way is there's way more people that you have to try to grease to get, there's way less bang for your buck in getting an influencer or whatever. Is that, if you've got somebody that donates $20 million and his brother owns the highway construction company or one construction company that's going to get this $300 million road rebuild project, if you get elected, that's way more fucking tangible bang for your buck, one person that I'm having to strike a deal with. Whereas I can tell you from having run social media campaigns, both as an influencer and doing it on the reverse side, is that it's very limited impact with that. There's not a lot of true influence that way when it's manufactured, but
how would you solve the problem of, because we just talked about this a second ago, most people don't want to do this job.
Yeah.
For good reason. So what happens when those names on the list are the majority of 99.9% of people that are like, hell no, I'm not putting my family through that.
Yeah. To me, that's the best person to have do that job.
Right.
Is the guy that doesn't want it. To me, a moderate or a simple and fair means with which you compensate them, not just salary, but, like you could even have a board that says, okay, we're going to evaluate whoever is nominated. Okay, here's your situation. Here's what we're going to do for you, so that you're not fucking them over by saying, hey, you're the next congressman. Could there be exceptions with, the same way in jury do, like, hey, I have a special needs child, or I've got, there's just no way I can physically do it. And that's why you have a list of names, so that if the very top candidate, well, then you take the second, if you've got at least a few choices of here's the top 5 people that were nominated by every swinging dick in the entire county or region, then now, you can pretty much rest assured the top 10 names are going to be good motherfuckers if there's that many people voting for them.
Right.
So.
No, I think in theory you're onto something. But another shot at this whole proposal is, so basically it's forced service. And what happens when Mike Ritland, who we all say, hey, I think Mike would be a pretty good representative. What happens when Mike Ritland says, no, I'm not doing it. I love my business. I don't want to be away from my family. You're not going to make me do it. So it's like, then are we forcing people, to serve? Yeah, in that system, you would be kind of like jury duty. But would the overall state and country have better representation and be in a better place? Probably.
Yeah, I think they would. And I think, again, just like jury duty is that, there are people that just kind of want to get out of it, that will do a few things to get out of it. And then there's people who are like, I don't want to do it, but if there's that many people that think I'm the right guy, well, fuck, I guess I'll do it then, and to me, that's the guy you want doing it anyway, that doesn't want to do it, but is still willing to,
right,
based on the fact that there's that many people that want him to do it. And I think that's why, again, you give people, say 5 or 10, give us the 5 or 10 names of people that you would want doing it, so that,
So if, in hopes that out of those 5 or 10, you get 1 or 2 individuals that say, yeah, I'll do it.
Yeah. Again,
I could see that. I could see that being, possibly, a better system than what we have now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's just, in writing the book, I did it during, the kind of early shutdown period of when COVID hit and 15 days turned into fucking 12 months and change. And so I was thinking of and seeing of all the, just crazy shit that was going on.
But that's what happens when you follow the science, Mike.
That is true. That's right. Yeah. This week.
You can't argue with science, man.
Yeah. All right. So that's campaign, finance / election stuff. The one thing I will kind of throw an asterisk in there is that this only works really for the House of Representatives. Like on a national level, it's not going to work. But to me, again, I would, and I think it's a good kind of springboard into an experiment of trying it with the House of Representatives that way, is that, now you've got that most accurate representation, legitimate representation of the entire country, and then they're deciding on, who sits in the Supreme Court and, whether or not bills are passed for, whether they come from the president or what have you. I just, to me, it just makes sense to try to figure out a way to fix, a process that seems like every 2 and 4 years is just the same shit over and over. It's people doing the Bill Clinton thumb, like, I'm here to, because I'm your friend, and it's just like they just lie straight to your fucking face until they get in, and then they're in, and it's the same damn thing over and over. What do you think about Elon Musk buying Twitter?
My initial reaction was like, pretty celebratory, to be honest, man. I was, and I think at the baseline, it's hard for me to even see how, I guess it could, but I don't know how much worse that platform, could have got.
Yeah.
I think it's like kind of the cesspool of humanity. Yep. I mean, you and I were talking about it before we started recording, and just how inhumane people are on these social media platforms. And I think Twitter's probably the worst in my experience anyway. I try and stay off of there as much as possible. But I was pretty stoked when I saw it going down, just because, and I'm not a fan of like everything that Elon Musk, stands for, but I will say, he's got me, at least me, convinced that he really does. He really does care about free speech, and so he's a disruptor. He's an innovator. I think he's the rare type of combination of individual that could, give that platform a freedom facelift, if you will, and that'd be really helpful, I think, in so many ways, and just making sure that one side doesn't have a monopoly on the narrative, while the other side completely gets either canceled or pushed out, or feels like they have to go build their own system where they get a fair shake. And then also we're talking about campaigns. A lot of people believe that if Twitter and the tech giants wouldn't have, stymied or canceled the Hunter Biden laptop story prior to the election in 2020, that Joe Biden would not be president today.
It's hard to think otherwise.
Yeah, I think some of the polling showed that like 17 or 20% of Democrats and independents that voted for him said that they wouldn't have had they known about that story. So,
Yeah.
and I mean, it's hard to see, how people would. I mean, that, a lot of the stuff contained in that, and I don't think we know the full extent of everything that was contained or is contained in that hard drive and that computer. But some of the corruption that was going on, using the family to enrich himself, is it's kind of sad that we're at this place in 2022, but I would love to see more of our social media platforms be led by individuals that are really all about free speech.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I have another idea that I want to throw at you in terms of social media since we're talking about it. But I guess before I share my thought on that is that I agree 100%. Like, to me, Elon buying it, I think is really net positive. And I think you can tell by, some of the statements he's made of like, financially, this is going to be a big hit. This is not going to be easy. Like, he knows enough to know that what he's doing, it's not going to be fun. It's not going to be easy. He's already taken a lot of hits. It would have been easy for him to just still be the richest guy in the world running Tesla. That, most of the people that now hate him for buying Twitter, are huge Tesla fans. They all drive him. They all kind of stroke his ego that way, in doing so. And it would have been a lot easier for him to just keep riding that train. I mean, he obviously doesn't need another dime and almost couldn't spend the amount of money that he has in his life reasonably. And so, I do agree with you 100% that, him buying that, I think, is an alternative to the idea that I have. It's just you're relying on, people to all be that way, whereas most people that have that kind of money want to keep that kind of money, and they're doing it for the money. I mean, you can tell by the way the way that he lives, he doesn't give a fuck about money. I mean, yes, he spends a lot of money on extravagant trips and stuff like that, but he sold all of his houses. I mean, he lives in a very modest place. He is very outside the norm as it relates to people that are, multi-billionaires that way. And you can tell by so many of the things that he does. But the social media idea that I had that I'd love for, if you get in that position, to try to bring up is that I know you and I are very on the same sheet of music as it relates to not wanting the government to be any more involved than they need to be.
Right.
But what I will say is, just like with driver's licenses and certain, whether it's substances or, mechanisms within the government that does make sense, whether it's maintaining roads, I mean, you name it. I do think there are some things that the government should be involved in. And based off of the research, now that the internet and social media platforms have been around long enough to see the result of kids who have grown up with them, just how incredibly fucking dangerous and toxic social media is for young kids, is that, to me, I would treat it no different than a driver's license. In that, the internet is, I would argue, in many ways more dangerous than the interstate that way, in terms of the impacts that it can have, especially on kids. And so, piggybacking off of the driver's license idea is that children are not allowed to have social media profiles. And in fact, everybody has to be verified the same way that you are a driver's license. And you can use the same number, you can use the same photo ID, or the ID photo rather. And so when you turn 16, or if you're older or whatever, is that your social media profile ID number is the same as your driver's license. It has the same picture, and you're verified through every single social media platform. So now there are no troll accounts, there's no bot accounts, are there still going to be ways? I mean, yes, people still get fake IDs and whatever, but not on a mass scale. It's going to be very difficult to do that. And so Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, Twitter, all of them, when you sign up for an account, you have to prove this is me, here's my ID, and now you have a blue check mark, and it's that photo. You can't change it. It's your real fucking name. And now anytime you want to run your mouth, everybody knows exactly who the fuck you are.
Right.
And you can't do that until you're 16. And no different than if I let my 9-year-old drive my car, I'm breaking the fucking law. If I hand my 9-year-old my phone on Instagram and now they're using my profile at a minimum, they don't have their own, but they're not allowed on there until they're 16, period, on any of them. To me, that cuts so much of the bullshit that is so poisonous and toxic, both with adults and especially children, whether it's being groomed on the internet, sex trafficking wise, whether it's the cyberbullying that has skyrocketed fucking children's suicide to a disgusting fucking level at this point, and just all of the vitriol and the keyboard warriors that run their fucking mouth with zero consequence, is it gets rid of almost all of that.
Yeah.
And to me, it just seems like a very common sense, not that difficult to implement. And even if it is, I mean, it's going to be the heaviest lift on these social media companies, but fuck them. I think, the least they could do with, seeing all the things that coming out with the studies on Facebook and how they knew what they were doing and did it anyway. And some of the Snapchat engineers of using dopamine and the same mechanisms that receptors in your brain use on being addicted to drugs use to get kids to fucking continue to use their product over and over. The least they could fucking do is do something like that to regulate it.
Well, I'd say at the very least, I really like the idea, and you did allude to something when you opened up that thought process, in that you and I both want the government to stay as much out of our lives as possible. And typically I think guys like us tend to be, we like to deregulate things, not to regulate things. However, I think that you're correct in sounding the alarm, and also problematically being willing to try to do something about it. And like you, Mike, I think I'd be open enough to something like that, because I think it's one of the many key pillars of why our culture and society is just crumbling.
Yeah.
I mean, what all the pressures and just, the nonsense, the toxicity that comes with social media. So that is something that I would definitely be willing to look at. And I would definitely be willing, to hear every single side there was. Yeah. And I think that if you have the time and you're a good leader, you will invite people, both critics, pros, supporters, detractors, into the room to be like, hey, Mike, Eli, this is why this is a good idea. No, Mike, Eli, this is why this is a bad idea. And so you've clearly been thinking about this idea for a long time. I don't know how long you've been thinking about it. This is my first time hearing about it, and I like where you're going with it, just because I agree with you in that, this is one thing where I think it is extremely bad for our kids. I think it's in many ways bad for adults. However, if you're an adult and you wanna sit in your lazy boy chair and eat cheesy poofs and 40-ounce sodas all day, that's your call. But when it comes to kids, like, there's a difference. Yeah,
I mean, there's a lot of rules that already exist that make sense, that I think most sensible, decent people are okay with and endorse. Driving, voting, drugs, alcohol. Drugs. I mean, from a prescription drug standpoint, there's a reason certain things aren't allowed for kids to have until they're a certain age, because their brain is X. Drinking, smoking, fucking. There are a lot of things that we're okay with not allowing kids to partake in, because we know that while yes, this is supposed to be a free country, there are certain things that it doesn't make sense to allow kids to have access to. And to me, social media has more than proven that it is a detriment to young kids' development to be exposed to that 12 fucking hours a day, like a lot of them are.
Yeah, I know that just talking to professionals in the industry that child suicides are up. there's a lot of things that are up, but it's interesting, Mike. I've been on this campaign trail for, I think, close to 9 months now. And I hear a lot of ideas from people. I'll be honest, some of them, I think are pretty outlandish, crazy. Some of them are decent. I think that's one of the better ideas I've heard, honestly.
Awesome.
Just because, and like I said, I would be interested to hear what your viewers have to say about that. Yeah. And just tear it apart, rebuild it.
Yeah.
How do we protect our kids, from like things that you were talking about, a system that's designed, kind of like a casino, to keep them trapped within it, to keep those dopamine levels up. But how a system that, I don't know that there are many honest studies that would show are good for their development overall.
Yeah. No, none of it. And to me, why I think it makes sense for a number of reasons to do 16 is that, one, it's the same age for driving, and I think there's a parallel in terms of the level of mental responsibility and maturity that is required to operate a moving vehicle on your own. Same thing of navigating the internet is, by the time they're that age, most kids are capable of having a certain level of responsibility, far more than they are even 2 years younger than that, especially 3, 4, 5, 6 years younger than that. But the other thing with that is that, just like with a driver's license or the driving experience, is that you've got 2 years of access to and the ability to engage in while still being under the wings and tutelage of parents.
Right.
So it's not, because I wouldn't say wait until they're 18, because then you have the Amish kid going to Manhattan, experience where the kid loses their fucking mind because they've never been on social media, and now they're out of their parents' house. They can vote, they can tell them to fuck off, they can leave, whatever. And now they also have full access to all these social media platforms. Is that you've got that 2 year kind of apprenticeship window, if you will, of understanding how to navigate that you can go to your parents and they can see, okay, now that they have access to this, I'm seeing this downturn or whatever, because they're still in their house, and you can still keep an eye on them. I think, again, and to just piggyback it onto that, it makes it as simple as you can make it, in terms of not adding so much bullshit to the government's plate and to these companies' plate, to where you can just integrate it where it's all the same fucking thing. Yeah. To me, it just makes good sense. But as a dad, and seeing my kids and their friends and the impacts that some of this stuff has on them, I see it firsthand, and that's kind of where the idea came from. It's like, there's all these other mechanisms that we put in place to protect our kids from things that are obviously harmful to them at certain ages. Why are we not doing it with this under the guise of, free speech? It's like, well, okay, it's a free country. Why don't you let your kids drink fucking booze when they're 5? Well, there's a reason, So anyway,
and I think that brings up a good point. I think a lot of it too comes down to being a good parent.
Yeah,
like, I think when a lot of times as a parent you feel torn, and between doing what you feel what's right for your kid and not wanting to fight with them, right? And so it's like, I think that is something that I would definitely be willing to consider. And I think it, initially off the bat, I don't really see any downside to it. But I think one way, without the government or the tech, gurus and giants getting involved in the regulating of these platforms. And unfortunately, a lot of kids don't have good parents. They just don't. But, if more of us as parents stepped up and just said, hey, I don't really care.
Yeah.
You're not gonna have a social media. You're not gonna be on social media until you're 16 or whatever the rule in the house is. I think that we would do a much better job of protecting our kids.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of additions to that. Is that it's easy to take or remove that being the bad guy as a parent completely out of it, right? Is it, hey, like, just like I can't let you drink or drive my car, like, honey, legally you can't be on here. Like, I'm not going to break the law and risk going to jail so that you can be on Facebook.
Yeah, like,
it's not me. Like, so that removes a lot of conflict between parents, and to the to the other side of that, I mean, try giving a 9-year-old a smartphone with unlimited access to everything and allow them to sign up for whatever they want and give them 2 years, right? So now they're 11, and then take that phone from them and see what happens, right? Is that kid is going to act like a heroin addict that you just took their fucking supply away from. I mean, I've seen it. Like they fucking melt down and have withdrawals and lose their fucking mind, which tells you everything you need to know about that dopamine and serotonin response and how powerfully addictive social media is to young kids as they're growing up. I mean, it's fucking terrible. Yeah. You know, so, and then I think lastly is that it, on the adult side, is that it removes so much of the, you know, you talk about, and it's a hotbed topic right now, is what's the new department that the administration is trying to come up with? Misinformation. Like,
good Lord.
I mean, if that's not, you know, one, you know, long jump step towards tyranny, I don't know what is. But this removes that also, is that to me, society will hold itself accountable better than the government can. So the government, I don't want them telling anybody what they can and can't say, is that if you make sure that everybody who is on these platforms is that they're verified that, yeah, that's who you are, and there's no bullshit accounts, guess who's not running their mouth now because there's nowhere to hide. Right. I mean, it almost entirely removes the ability for, you know, people to just, you know, have some like V for Vendetta picture and a string of numbers as the name, private account with 3 followers that was, you know, the account was created 9 days ago, telling you that he wants to skin your fucking kids alive in front of him or in front of you. Like, that doesn't exist anymore, you know? So like you don't have to have all these misinformation campaigns if you go about it the other direction and just make sure that everybody who's on there is who they say they are and there's nowhere for them to fucking hide. Here's the one hole that somebody may shoot in is, okay, that's great for the United States. What about Canada? What about Europe? You know, similarly, whether it's a passport, every country institutes a national ID system of some kind. So for those of you, and that's one point that I've shared this idea with people before, and that was really the only one drawback. It's like, well, what about people in like fucking South America, you know, or whatever? It's like, do the same thing, or even if it's Twitter or whoever, they still, you know, okay, this is who you say you are. Here is your identification based fucking profile number, and you know, you vet it the same way you would a passport coming into this country. You know, to me, it's not that difficult, and I'm sure there is probably inherently some logistical or administrative hiccups that may come that our government should be able to sort through, you know, without too much trouble in terms of the administrative hurdle that might come up with something like that. But anyway, anything else you want?
Interesting. Yeah.
All right. So guns, you know, to me, Texas is a big gun state. Arizona is a big gun state in terms of friendly. Just kind of the one question, I know you and I are both big pro Second Amendment supporters, but one argument that I've seen is where do you draw the line in terms of what's legal versus not? And this is something that I will freely admit, like sometimes I wouldn't say that I question myself, but I'm not sure on in terms of at what level do you say, okay, that probably shouldn't be available to the public. I don't know where that line is sometimes. Sometimes it's further away than others, but my point is that hand grenades, explosives, tanks, sniper rifles, you know, at a point, is there a point for you, I guess, where you think, hey, Second Amendment wise, like, no, I don't think you should be able to go buy a fucking tank?
Man, that is a tough one. You know, I tend to, you know, I'm pretty hardcore on the Second Amendment. You know, that shall not be infringed, and the right to maintain a well-regulated militia. You know, if you go look at the entirety of the Second Amendment, and I get why that scares the hell out of people. I get it. I totally get it. Especially when you live in a society where mass shootings have become, you know, more regular. But here's the deal. The deal, as far as I'm concerned, one of the biggest reasons we were given that right is in case our government ever became tyrannical.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I actually wrote an article about this many years ago, and the article was, I'll try and remember the name of it, is basically, I see your AR-15 and I raise you an aircraft carrier and a Predator drone, right? And what the article did was, and what I was trying to explore and take a look at is back when the Second Amendment was created, okay? Back when the Second Amendment was created, the difference or the variance between what the government had weaponry-wise and what the citizen had was pretty close. I mean, it was muskets, cannons, swords. I mean, those were the primary weapons. If you look at the difference and the variation now in the modern era between the weaponry that our federal government has and what a private citizen is allowed to own, right? So you have nuclear submarines, aircraft carriers, Predator drones, fighter planes, I mean, nuclear weapons. And now you have a citizen, that, can have an assault weapon or an AR-15 or a magazine-fed semi-automatic rifle, right? And so I think what we were trying to look at in that piece was the variance has become much wider than it used to be.
Yeah.
And so, I wanted to make people think about what would it look like. You just got done talking about this new misinformation, department that, the Biden administration is trying to form. So, and you said it yourself, you see the steps, the long strides towards tyranny. I mean, look at, there's a saying that, every tyrant knows that all you have to do to become successful is to control the media and to disarm the populace, right? And think about it. I mean, so it's like you were just talking about a misinformation czar or whatever they're going to call this individual in this department, and who they're going to be going after. Basically, people that they feel threaten their supremacy or their power, right?
Yeah.
And so it's sad and it's unfortunate, but the very reason that the Second Amendment, one of the primary reasons besides being able to defend yourself, is getting closer and closer, I think, to being necessary.
Yeah.
And so when you look at that gap and how far it's widened since the Second Amendment was crafted, I tend to be more of a less regulation on this for that reason. Yeah. Because of how far that gap has widened. And so I understand how when you start really looking at that, I mean, there's serious implications to it. There are serious implications when you start going down that road. But Mike, to be honest with you, the way I look at it is I'm very, very against a couple years ago, it was red flag laws. And I understood why people were talking about red flag laws. Okay. I understood the intention behind it. Some people had good intentions. I think some people that hate the fact that we have a Second Amendment, that have always been after the Second Amendment, I think they see it as a way to disarm the populace. And to me, so much of the destruction of the rights and liberties that we have in this country, it hasn't been one fatal blow. It's been death by 1,000 cuts. Yeah. And the way I look at these issues, especially when it comes to the Second Amendment, is if you give them a crack or if you give them an inch, they will take a mile. And, there are individuals out there that own tanks. Yeah. There are individuals out there that own machine guns. And most of these folks that have this, they're not the ones going around and, being involved in crime, because the amount of registration and paperwork that it even comes with getting like a SBR, a short barreled rifle, or a suppressor or a machine gun, it's a ton. And you are on every every database, every radar that the government has.
Yeah.
And so these individuals know that, and, you know, they're not the ones typically that are out there, you know, involved in a lot of these crimes that you see going on, and the chaos, you know. And so for me, I'm very, you know, I'm very weary and very cautious when it comes to the government coming in and regulating that, you know, the Second Amendment or what we can own.
Yeah. No, I don't disagree with any of that.
But I understand where you're coming from. Like, I don't know where that line is, because you're looking at the other side of it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the questions I ask of many of my guests, I'd say most of them are very devil's advocate. And in many cases, they're not positions that I even hold. You know, it's just, to me, like, in the interest of stepping out of the echo chamber. And I know, you know, it's one of the things that really drives me batshit crazy about the left is there's such a vacuum in an echo chamber where so many of these high profile, whether it's politicians, media pundits, whatever, are never challenged on their position. You know, and to me, like, if you can't defend your position, even against yourself, basically, if you're not picking it apart yourself, then, you know, how strong of a position is it, and ultimately how good of an idea is it really, if you can't fucking defend it, you know? And so
right.
To me, I don't disagree with anything you said. I'm not a proponent of stomping on any Second Amendment rights. There are times where I'm like, fuck yeah, I don't know where that line is in terms of, you know, high explosives or fucking cannons or, you know, whatever. I mean, ultimately, like, if people want stuff, they'll find a way to get it. I mean, that's, you know, pretty well proven in every industry, whether it's drugs, guns, fucking, you name it. You know, and bringing up red flag laws similarly, like, you know, my position on that is very one-sided in that, you know, I think, agreed, it's a crack or a door opening to erode rights and try to strip things away, because whoever is in charge of that list, or whoever has the power and the authority to say, okay, this person checks these 5 boxes, who's making that decision? What are those boxes that they're checking that makes it okay, this guy meets this criteria, we're taking his guns away? Like, who's in charge of the list? Who's making that decision? Who has the authority to modify that
right.
list?
And it eliminates your due process.
Yeah, but I think, you know, most importantly, and to simplify that as best as I can, is that, to me, like, on a just kind of a common sense standpoint, is we really already have that. I mean, imagine you have a family member that you think is so dangerous that you don't think that they should own firearms, right? If there's anybody that I know that they're at that level where I'm like, this dude shouldn't have that shit, I'm going to try to get him into a mental institution. Like, if that's the case, I don't think they should drink alcohol. I don't think they should be able to rent a fucking Ryder truck, you know, because who knows? You know, I mean, you can mow down fucking civilians at a bus stop, you know, with a vehicle. I mean, you know, so to me, it's, you know, that same argument of, like, it's but one tool of thousands to take people's lives with, and to focus on that is disingenuous. But anyway, so yeah, I appreciate your position on guns. Similarly, Texas and Arizona are both border states. I have a feeling you and I are pretty similar on what we think should be done with the border, but I would love to get your official position on the border, and then I have a follow-up question, I guess, after that. But
yeah, I mean, my official position on the border is that every country in the world has a right to their own sovereignty and to have a border where they can control what comes in and what goes out. And it's disgraceful to me to see what's been going on at our border from so many different ways. It's disgraceful. It's disgraceful to see how the media, you know, has perpetuated nonstop misinformation about, I mean, last year you had the Border Patrol agents are whipping these, which was total nonsense. You know, these folks coming across the border. So step one, we have to shut that border back down and make it, I don't mean shut it down to where there's nothing that can come in or can't go out. But right now it's it's an open gate. And it's not only an open gate, but you have the leadership on our side of that gate with a megaphone saying, hey, come one, come all, we're open for business. Yeah. And it has so many ramifications and implications throughout our country that are secondary and tertiary. I mean, it overwhelms our law enforcement agencies. It overwhelms oftentimes our hospitals for those people that live near. Yeah. For people that live near the border, that hospitals can't turn away, people that don't have health care, aren't citizens, et cetera. And sometimes as a citizen, when you're paying your taxes and you have health care and you go to take your sick kid or even yourself into the hospital and you can't, your wait time becomes, I know people, especially during COVID that waited out in the hallway for, 24 hours. Yeah. And so, and I'm talking about secondary and tertiary issues right now. I'll get to the primary ones, but even auto insurance. Like I was blown away when I left the SEAL teams, moved from California to Arizona to see that was one area where my budget actually increased was on our auto insurance. We couldn't believe it. There must be something wrong with this. We're leaving California. We're going to Arizona. How can our insurance be increasing? It's increasing because there are so many illegals driving around Arizona who don't have car insurance. And so these insurance companies, when there's a wreck, they're not covered. And so they jack up the rates, right? So that's a tertiary effect. But, when you come down to the primary effects of what's coming through that border, you and I, as, former sheepdogs, we look at it from the perspective of probably security in many ways. Yeah. All right. So you had, I think last year I saw a study showing that there were over 20 individuals that were contacted at that border that were on the terrorist watch list. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. How many, Mike, if there's 20 that got contacted, how many do you think got through? Yeah. I mean, because when I talk to my buddies that are in the Border Patrol, they'll tell you, hey, we maybe get 10% that it's coming through. Okay. So you got that. Then you got the cartels, and all the drugs and opioids and fentanyl that they're bringing through, which happens to be the number one killer in this country. I think between the ages of like 18 and 45 or something like that. Yeah. So you've got the drugs, then you've got the terrorists, which I already mentioned. Then you've got the gang members, right? That come into a lot of these lower income minority communities and they get involved in organized crime. And, in many cases they terrorize these communities. All right. Then you have the whole sex trafficking issue that you were talking about a second ago. And, you have all these little kids that are being trafficked, through that border, to perversion here in the United States. And it's almost like the leadership could care less about any of it. They could care less about any of it. And to me, it's disgusting. It's sad. And it's just, it's completely unacceptable. And I will say this, I've said this publicly multiple times. If I get into the House, if I become a representative, I will absolutely vote to impeach Joe Biden for his dereliction of duty and his absolute failure to protect American citizens and our communities from everything that I just mentioned. Yeah,
I couldn't agree more. I mean, especially when you see the bandwidth that's given via the administration on, say, COVID, right? Is that you nailed it? 18 to 44, the leading cause of death is opioid overdose. Yeah. Right. And so you never hear about that. It's go get your vaccine, shut the fuck up. If you don't, you're killing people. It's like that's a not even in the top 10, but by comparison from 18 to 44. Right. And they're not talking about it. Like, it's like the obliviousness with which they navigate their day-to-day issues is,
and where a lot of those chemicals for those opioids come from.
Yeah, China. I mean, they're all coming from fucking China. Yep. I mean, there's Chinese scientists, chemists, pharmacists, in Mexico helping them, build all that shit out. It's unbelievable. So I'm right there with you in terms of the you got to be out of here by noon, right?
Yeah.
So I'm 100% on board with you in terms of it needs to be not shut down but monitored. The entire thing needs to be an actual gate. The big question is, and this is another thing where half devil's advocate, half I'm not sure, what do you do with the existing people who are here illegally?
To me, you take. I'm not even going to. I won't even go there until step one is complete.
Yeah.
I won't even go there, and some of it's strategic, but I won't even entertain that topic until we do the right thing and shut this border down.
Yeah.
It's like putting the cart before the horse, man.
Yeah.
It's like, it's like crawl, walk, run. It's like, hey.
Yeah, it's like mopping up the flooded bathroom floor while the toilet's still overflowing.
And there won't, I don't think there will be I don't think that that will be clearly that's going to be a very divisive issue. You will not please everybody. You're going to piss a lot of people off no matter where you are. But for me, I won't even go there or discuss it until we do the right thing. Shut that border down. Get that wall finished, and at that point we can have the conversation.
So for somebody that would say, okay, well, I'm not going to vote for you if you won't tell me what you think on this.
Then don't vote for me.
Don't vote for me.
Yeah, don't
I like
vote for me.
It's impossible not to respect that.
Yeah, I mean,
no, I dig it. Prison reform. The United States is, the leading country in the world in terms of incarceration. Again, in my book, which I'm going to give you a copy, not that you probably read it, you probably wipe your ass with it, but if you find time on a tour bus or on a plane ride or something, I'd love to get your take on it. But because I talk about all the same stuff in there, but prison reform, I think, is a big thing in that. Whether you bring race into it for saying that the incarceration rate is lopsided, or just the things that are illegal that I have a hard time thinking that they should be, and people that are behind bars because of it. What is your take on, I guess, the prison system as a whole from a 30,000-foot viewpoint? Does there need to be reforms? How would you, let's say it's President Crane, is there something that you would do, or what is your take on the prison system as a whole?
I think that my posture on this one is one of open-mindedness in the regard of I'm willing to listen. Okay, but here's the other thing: we have seen we've seen prison reform and criminal justice reform. We've seen this. It's kind of a trend that's flowing through the U.S. And I think a lot of it is done with, I think some of it is done with good intention or generated with good intention, but I think that oftentimes it winds us up in a worse spot. And I'll give you, an example right now that, like in Arizona, one of the things in the state house that, was going around was eliminate cash bail, right? And I talked about decision loops and how you make decisions. I think that a lot of people focus on what's your policy. I think that stuff's good, but I think it's equally as important when you're talking to a leader or a representative. Like, what's your decision-making process, Mike? How do you even? Because nobody has all the answers. Yeah. Nobody does. And if you act like you do, you're full of it. Yeah. Okay. And so it's like what I do when I hear this stuff come up. You and I, because of our backgrounds, we both have a lot of friends that are cops or agents or whatnot. I go and ask these guys about it. Yeah. I'm like, hey, what are the boots on the ground? What are the guys that do this for a living? What are they seeing? And they'll tell me, hey, most of them seem open, and they'll tell you, hey, it's not a perfect system by any stretch of the imagination. And we're open to hearing ideas, and we're even open to improving it. Because a lot of these guys that you talk to, they don't take joy in throwing people behind bars or ruining lives or wrecking they don't at all. Most of them just want to, and obviously there's exceptions everywhere. There's
everywhere.
exception in the teams. There's exception.
Yeah, I mean, there's doctors that try to kill people. I mean, there's no...
Right? So what I would say is if you're doing it, if you're going to try and pass something, the solution, the quote unquote solution, can't put you in a worse spot than you're already in. And that's what I'm seeing when I talk to a lot of these individuals that are sheriffs or police chiefs or whatnot. They're saying, "Hey, Eli, this stuff it's making our communities less safe, actually." Because a lot of people don't realize this, but we think that there's a lot of guys that, just get hit up for, having marijuana in their pocket, and then they're get hit in a slammer. Typically these guys that are going away, a lot of times it's their third, fourth, fifth offense. They've been warned, people in their lives are coming to them. Hey, you got to knock this off. You got to knock this off. You got to knock this off. And they just stay down this course. And I was talking to one sheriff just on this one issue of bail reform. I was talking to a sheriff in my neck of the woods. And this guy's a former Marine. He's a Mexican-American guy. And I was asking him, I'm like, "Hey, dude, what do you think about this stuff?" And he's like, "Well, and you could tell his heart was open to solutions and making the system better. But he said, Eli, sometimes that bail that's going to get that individual out comes from grandma, the only member of that family that has enough money to bail the individual out." And he said, sometimes that bail is the anchor that, make sure that individual shows up to court. And so he was like, cause I sent him the bill. I was like, "Hey man, do you think that this is going to make our communities safer or more dangerous?" And he said, "More dangerous." He said, I would not get behind that. Yeah. And, so typically when I'm looking at issues like that, I try and have an open mind about it, but I always try and go to the professionals, the boots on the ground, and I ask questions.
Yeah. Again, I mean, I can't tell you how refreshing it is to hear that. And I'm not trying to blow smoke up your ass. It's just, there's so few guys that do that. And I agree in that. Going back to the border real quickly, similarly, like, I don't give a fuck what Kamala Harris thinks is going to make the border safer, because she doesn't fucking have any idea. Yeah. And to be fair, neither does anybody on the right, that isn't day in, day out. And similarly, I mean, between the K9 industry and living in Texas and just, the networks that you and I both run around in, I have a lot of Border Patrol friends and such. And
who you should think about having on your podcast?
Who's that?
Art Del Cueto.
All right.
Sounds like Antonio Banderas. Art Del Cueto.
Sounds like a porn star.
He's the vice president of the Border Patrol Union.
Yeah, I'd love to have him on. If you can hook us up, that'd be great.
I mean, that guy will be able to, talk. You guys can have a insane conversation about.
Yeah, I'd love to have him on. But I guess my point is that I don't know. They don't know. Like, ask the people that have spent the last 20 years trying to work the border.
Those guys actually endorsed me in my race, which is a big one in Arizona. But one of the reasons they did is because that's how I go into these situations and these tough questions. Like, guys, tell me what I don't know, because I know I think that as a politician or a candidate, the general thinking is, well, if I go into this meeting or I'm on this podcast and I act like I don't know the answer to something, then they're going to think that I'm clearly unqualified.
Yeah, I mean, that's an ego thing. I mean, the best leaders in the world surround themselves with the people that they don't know shit about.
Yep.
And I think similarly, like, to me, it's back to, your decision-making process. I have a fairly similar one that I'll get into here in just a second. But to me, it's like, ask yourself a simple question. It's not how do you secure the border or what do you do this, that, and the other. It's, do you want the border secured? Yes or no? If the answer is yes, then ask the people that secure it for a living how to do it, or just tell them, hey, secure the fucking border. I don't care how you do it. You guys are the experts. You do it.
And you just nailed it, Mike. That's the problem. They don't want it secure.
Yeah,
they don't.
Yeah,
because a lot of these folks, not just running the U.S., but running everything, they're globalists, dude. They don't want borders. It goes against like their charter.
Yeah,
they want globalism. It's it's unfortunate, but that's That's how it is.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it's that simple. I mean, I'd love to have somebody from the administration or somebody that's in a position to actually do something about it and just ask them that simple question. And I don't know why more people don't do that. I mean, even a White House, press representative from any major network. Do you guys want the border secure or not? Yes or no? Like not, well, no, there's no depends. Do you want it secured or not?
Yeah.
Yes or no? And if you say yes, then I would say, then why don't you just tell the Border Patrol, hey, secure the border. You guys are the experts, figure it out and secure it. Like why is that not discussed? I don't give a fuck what Jen Psaki thinks. I don't give a fuck what Joe Biden thinks. I don't give a fuck what Kamala Harris thinks she knows about doing anything or not doing it. Like, you guys aren't Border Patrol agents. You're fucking politicians. If I have a political question, I'll ask you guys. Yep. The border has nothing to do with that. But anyway, back to the prison issue. I get off track. I get fucking fired up sometimes. But the prison thing, I think, similarly, is that the decision-making process, and I appreciate and really respect yours, is that to me, I ask the very first question is, how big of a deal is this? Yeah. Is it pick an issue, is that look at the data. Like, no different than an ER doctor would triage a bus accident where there's 40 people that come in. Okay, who are the 5 worst off people? Right. Okay, well, that's what we're going to deal with. So COVID deaths, as an example, that's not on the radar. It's not even in the top 10 for that age group, right? So no, I'm not even going to worry about that. We're not going to talk about it. There's nothing to talk about at that point. What is the biggest problem? And so to me, like with prison, similarly, is it, okay, how big of a problem is this? And I love that you asked the sheriff, like, hey, is this going to make us safer or less safe? Not, I know what's going to make us safer. I'm going to ask the guy who actually deals with it every day, is this going to lead us down the primrose path or not? Yes, and we do it. No, then we don't. But so with prison, it's kind of that same, like, ask yourself one simple question is that, is prison, is the point of prison to punish and to discourage future similar activities? Yes. Okay. So then why isn't prison set up to do exactly that? Because it's not, right? I mean, the numbers wouldn't be what they are.
So you said to punish and to what?
And to discourage further continued activities that landed them there in the first place, right? So
yeah, I would say that those are correct, but I would also add on top of that list to keep the communities safe in many cases that have been terrorized by these people.
Yeah, agreed. And so, so my take is that, and I pull this from dog training, is that, from a psychological standpoint, it's the exact same principle. There is an undesired behavior that you want to extinguish, right? So it's that simple. So you provide a consequence to extinguish that undesirable behavior. If that consequence is not commensurate with extinguishing the behavior, then you've wasted your fucking time. Further, in most cases, whether it's prisoners, human beings, dogs, kids, whatever, the psychology behind the learning of that in this example is the exact same, irrespective of any of those variables. Is that further, if it doesn't extinguish it, a lot of times it emboldens and builds confidence in doing it again, right? And so as a dog trainer, if dog X is doing behavior Y and I provide consequence B, if B isn't enough to get X and Y out of the equation, then B doesn't work, and I have to do something, more or whatever. And so with prison, it, like all of these prison shows that you see, and there's the one in Arizona with that sheriff where there's like, civilians that go in there and get, they're on camera and like they infiltrate and like they're playing games and shit. Like the fact that that's even possible, I think, highlights and speaks volumes to how ridiculous our punishment system is for criminals. But, to me, as you well know, environmental factors are incredibly motivating, or can be. And so my take is that to cut down on the number of prisoners, the recidivism rate, as well as the amount of money that we fucking spend every year on incarceration, is that you make those conditions appropriate to keep people from wanting to come back, because right now they're not. A lot of people enjoy being in prison. They'll do things to get back into prison. Yeah. You shouldn't be able to watch TV and get a fucking degree and all this other stuff. If the goal is, again, to punish and to discourage that further use. My take is, and most people are going to disagree with this and say it's cruel and unusual punishment, however, is that, you know, you have a cell that's just big enough to lay down in, and there's a Middle East style toilet and a sink. You don't get any clothes, right? You have no furniture, right? And the ambient temperature in that prison system, not just the cell but the entire system, is on the verge of you being hypothermic, right? So you are freezing your fucking ass off all the time. You're totally naked and you have to lay on the ground. Now, imagine how long any of these guys, these tough, hardened fucking badasses, where you've seen some of the toughest men you've ever come across be so cold that they're willing to fucking quit, right? Is that will take the piss and vinegar out of fucking everybody, especially when you're sleeping that way, right? When you're shivering, naked, fucking sleeping.
Right.
But you put them in that environment. How long do you think it would take for somebody to be in that environment day in, day out before they say, I am never, ever fucking coming back to this again?
Yeah. No, from a strictly problematic standpoint, I mean, you're on the money.
Yeah, 2 weeks.
However, that, you know, I believe it's the 8th Amendment protection against unreasonable or
cruel and unusual
punishment. Sorry, that's and you already said that prior. And most people would consider that, and that's where you run into the rub. Is that okay? You're now violating my constitutional rights, and so from a problematic standpoint, which is good, because I thought as you started going down the dog trainer tangent, you're going to be like,
electrocuting
put choker collars on these guys. And,
well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's just environment, right? That's all it is. I mean, but to be fair, though, I mean, solitary confinement isn't any less cruel.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not. Like, there's been enough studies done that for a human being who, in most circumstances, who are inherently and genetically very social creatures.
Yeah.
Putting them in that environment is one of the most cruel and detrimental mentally environments you can put somebody in.
You know, it's like most guys I know would rather take a punch in the chops than be isolated for 12 hours. But, but we live in such a soft culture and such a soft society that, you know, it's like, you know, even that, I mean, it's considered, you know, it'd be considered barbaric, cruel, unusual, et cetera, et cetera. So,
I mean, to me, I guess the frustrating part with that is that, one, it's all in the eye of the beholder. What I think is cruel, somebody else maybe think is not, and vice versa. But further, I think the current system psychologically is more cruel and unusual than that environment that I just said. In that, like, if you're having nervous breakdowns or fearing being raped or stabbed or being in that, you know, dog eat dog world of gangland where everything is race based, how the fuck is that less cruel and unusual than just being in a place where you're freezing your fucking ass off? Like, you're not getting ass raped, you're not getting stabbed, you're cold as fuck.
Yeah.
You know, but mentally that has less of a traumatic impact than what normal prison is in some of the harder places. I mean, with some of the fucking people there around. But
dude, you might be right. I mean, I can't. You know, I hope I never taste it, but man, I can't, you know, it's funny. I jokingly tell people all the time, you know, being on a ship for me was like being on a floating prison, but it didn't have near the level of hardships that the folks that end up in that institution deal with on a daily basis. And I think it would be a brutal environment. But to your point, do I think that there would be less, recidivism? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because, you know, people, that would be a real deterrent.
Yeah. I mean, if you know, like, it's not, I can't wait to get back in so I can, you know, hustle cell phones and drugs and be a shot caller for this fucking gang and run my fucking drug business out of here. And I mean, like, that shit isn't happening there. If you're so fucking cold to where you're about to freeze to death.
Yeah.
All the time. Like, you're not trying to rape other people. You're not trying to fight anybody. You're not trying to smuggle shit in. Like, the only thing you're worried about, I mean, take SEER school.
Yeah.
Like, at fucking 1 a.m, you know, in the environments that we do that in, when it's 36 fucking degrees, there is one thing you're thinking about, and that's it. One fucking thing, you know, and that's trying to get warm. That's it.
Yeah.
You know, but anyway, I know we're running short on time. There's one last thing I want to talk about before we wrap up, and that's foreign policy. Obviously, you and I have both gotten our hands dirty for Uncle Sam and have been all over the world on behalf of him. both from a big picture standpoint and specifically Ukraine right now, because that's kind of, the big thing of what's going on. What's your stance on all of that?
My stance in one word would be caution as we go in, as I unpack that a little bit. As I've gotten older, one of the things that I really give credit to Donald Trump for is I think he awakened a lot of us to the America First movement. And basically, that has all sorts of connotations. Many of them aren't positive, but what it really to me is do you put an America first, or is this the best thing for our country? That lens in front of every issue that you look at. What's going on in Ukraine is no different. And Mike, you and I know too many Gold Star moms. We know too many guys that didn't come home. We just got out of 2 decades worth of war. And so when I look at this situation with Ukraine, you have to look at the situation in its entirety. You can't just, and what the media is trying to do right now is they're trying to pull your heartstrings, and they're doing a pretty damn good job of it by showing, the families and the communities that have been
feed the children commercials.
Yeah. And many of them, they have been, and it's hard to watch. And if you don't have your heartstrings pulled when you watch that stuff, maybe you should go get some help. But the thing is like, you have to start, when you look at serious decisions, you have to look at serious outcomes, and you have to play this thing out as far as it could go. And what I like to remind people is that this is the same leadership group. We have the same administration that pulled us out of Afghanistan. I mean, that was one of the biggest debacles, one of the biggest embarrassments, one of the biggest loss of U.S. servicemen blood in a long time, because of their complete incompetence. And so if you took this leadership that we have, and this isn't a poke at the military at all. We still have, in my opinion, the greatest military in the world. And we still have, the best armed forces service members in the world as well, but we don't have good leadership. And so I look at this and I look at, okay, I know for a fact within the last 2.5 months, the Russians, the Iranians, and the Chinese have been running joint drills together. All right, that shows collaboration. It's intentional. It's not a coincidence. Okay, so if we get too froggy, if we get too aggressive with our actions in Russia, we could kick off World War III like that, faster than this whole thing unfolded. And if you back an individual like Vladimir Putin into a corner that isn't concerned about, inclusivity or a lot of the things that are, or his white rage, like a lot of our generals seem to be concerned about, that could be catastrophic. And so I think that we need to be extremely careful with how we proceed. I'm totally fine with humanitarian aid to an extent. I'm even okay with supplying weaponry, but by no stretch, I'm not okay with us talking about, sending in troops, boots on the ground, or equipment. And so, the other thing is we have to keep in mind, we're $30 trillion in debt, Mike. $30 trillion in debt. Oh, and by the way, we don't have a southern border.
Yeah.
Okay. And so you gotta prioritize things. You gotta look at the big picture, what could happen, what could go wrong. And you also have to look at, if things do go wrong, who's running the show. And if that doesn't scare the snot out of you, I don't know, and cause you to take a breath and pull back and be cautionary when looking at what's going on in Europe right now, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, do you remember towards the end of, I would say largely the combat operations in Afghanistan, this was a few years ago, where there were some reports of questionable evidence of Russia paying for. Do you remember the outcome of that, if that was verified or not?
I don't.
Yeah. So the reason I ask is that, to me, where there's this kind of strange gray area of the lunge from humanitarian to weapons is that if you put that shoe on the other foot, right, is that if Russian military forces were in Pakistan training Afghani, Taliban, and Al-Qaeda guys on our weapon systems, giving them weapons and ammo, and they were funneling it back in and fighting and killing our guys, how would we respond to that?
Right.
I have an idea of how we would respond to that, And so to me, agreed, this stuff is tough to watch. There are also dozens of other examples all over the fucking planet where equally egregious things are taking place while we're not even talking about it, let alone doing anything about it. And I'm not saying...
Right.
that we should just bury our heads in the sand and let, World War II happen all over again and do nothing about it. That is a tough decision to make and when to get involved versus not. I tend to look at history in terms of not repeating mistakes and also learning from the ways that we did things well. And I think World War II is a good kind of guideline for how to enact multinational geopolitical foreign policy that way, is that you get involved when you need to, basically, and then when you do, you take the gloves off and you do everything within your entire nation's populace's power to completely fucking wipe the floor with the opponent.
Right.
I think in this case, and taking World War II as an example, is that if a country gets into it and invades a neighbor, that's enough for the red flag to go off and say, okay, hey, wait a minute. Like, okay, they're trying to take over another country. You help with the humanitarian. Maybe you give weapons, maybe not. Again, that's a gray area, tough decision. Again, putting the shoe on the other foot of saying, well, how would we respond in kind? To me, it's anything past that. It's okay. Now we're going to this neighbor. Now it's all NATO countries. Basically Axis versus allies. World War II, good versus evil. Like now you have clearly shown that you're on the war path, trying to. Take over fucking, as much as you can. And then that's when you absolutely get involved. Could you argue that that's an oversimplification? Of course. I mean, every dynamic is different. Every situation has its own set of variables and intangibles that are different and drive, the reaction for us differently. But I think that's a good rule of thumb to just look at it that way. But,
yep.
So I got, from the standpoint of also kind of red lines, and this is something that both Obama and Biden, I think, are very guilty of and grossly inadequate in terms of how they talk about red lines and then don't do shit. To me, like he made that joke of talk softly and carry a big javelin, which is A, cheese dick, and B, I think a sacrilege to the original quote. Based on how he's conducted himself, is that he ran his mouth like he was a total fucking badass.
Yeah, I did.
During the campaign, So one, you didn't speak softly. You spoke like a total fucking tough guy with your peacock feathers straight up in the air. And then when somebody called your bluff, you folded like a cheap fucking lawn chair.
Yeah.
And to me, like that's the worst of both worlds. And both he and Obama have routinely done that. And I think that that's as dangerous as anything, frankly, is to talk tough and then not do shit. I mean, you see foreign policy wise, all of these different world leaders who won't even fucking take his phone call now. I mean, they don't respect us worth shit. They won't even talk to him, and they basically do whatever they want. And he's just kind of walking around looking lost. I mean, I honestly feel bad for the guy at this point, like seeing how deteriorated his mental condition is and what have you, but he just needs to not be in that position, plain and simple. But anyway, I know we're running out of time here. Is there anything you wanted to add to the foreign policy gig or?
Well, I mean, I think we're good. I think one of the big things right now, though, that is when we're talking about, foreign policy, we did green light the Russian pipeline, the energy pipeline, and we shut down our own.
Yeah,
and I think that has security implications. It obviously has massive economic implications. But again, this administration joked that it's good that the adults are returning,
Yeah.
and it's so ironic because you've gotten the exact opposite. You've gotten complete incompetence and, reckless policy behavior. And I think that's why you see so many guys that come from our world that never wanted to be in politics, that are recognizing how dangerous this threat is and how unsustainable it is, who have said, hey, I know I'm far from perfect, but I'll go. This is important enough where I will, put the comfort of my life behind for a moment, and I will go serve again. And so I do have hope when I see that, but I think that energy right now, what's going on with energy, it plays a big deal on so many different levels, but it cannot be ignored.
Yeah. Is there a red line for you personally in Ukraine where you would say, okay, if Russia does this, we have to actually send troops in and no-fly zone and all that?
You know what? I haven't really thought through to the point where I've discovered a red line. As far as the U.S. actually, getting involved in that conflict, what I would like to see is NATO actually step up in that case. And I think when you look at how much the U.S. has funded NATO over the years, I think that's if there is a red line, I would like to see that be the counter.
Yeah.
And I think it needs to be, or what's the point of it?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, I agree 100%. I wish we had more time. I didn't think it'd even go this long, but our long-winded asses.
Man, I'm starting to wonder why you're not running for office, dude. You got some good questions and some good solutions as well, man.
I'm not sure that I have any business in any political office, but in my idea of if enough people said, hey, you're the guy we want doing it, I would do it. But that's probably the only way I would do it. I don't know that I'd run on my own, but I can't thank you enough for taking time out of your day. I know you're busy as shit on the campaign trail. It's an honor to have you sitting here. I look forward to you winning and coming back and interviewing you again with a wizard look behind the curtain.
Yeah,
and have
you know
drive
the
car,
deal.
so,
you remember the deal.
Absolutely.
Don't have the truck in the parking lot. If I see that truck in the parking lot,
I'll take you to the house.
We're taking off, Matt. We're just out.
I'll take you to the house. We'll do it. I'll do it that way. But I wish you the best of luck. You have my full endorsement, that's for sure, and I'll certainly plug the same on all my stuff. When is the actual from now until when the election is? What does that look like for you, and when is the election for you?
Yeah, so our primary is in early August, and then the general is in November. So, one way or another, we're either this thing is over in August, or we move on to the next round. And like I said, I'm not super concerned about the outcome. Yeah. I'm just trying to not become something I don't hate, and be real and be authentic. In the process.
The micro decisions. I love it. What district is it?
It's the old CD1, but and I say that because we just had redistricting all over the country. Oh, okay. But now it's called CD2.
Okay. So CD2 Arizona, vote for Eli Crane. He's the man. No two ways about it. If not, choke yourself.
There you go. There you go.
Anyway, to the supporters, I hope you enjoyed this. It's been awesome being able to talk with Eli and get his take on everything and hash through some of these issues that I know all of us think about and are big ticket items for most Americans. So hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for the support. And as always, until next time, this is Mic Drop.